Let's everybody make jazz hands. Say welcome. Yeah. Hey, good to see you. It's Thursday night at 10, and we're glad to have you as always. Tonight's topic is really a question, and I've been sort of telling folks it's really an opportunity for stories tonight. The question is, what's more important, stress or color? So let's have a vote first. One would be stress, and two fingers means the color. So if you have to make a choice and prioritize one over the other, which one's most important? I can see my thinking types in the room. Okay. All right. So we already all know it's stress. But there are these few times when it's color. And so let's talk a little bit about that. But before we get into that, we need to be ready that conversations like this really get into the topic of taboo language. And so I'm going to invite Robin. That's why I encourage you to come to
yes.
just briefly explain, taboo language as a concept and why it always comes back to profanity and other taboo words.
Well, taboo, I don't know what you want me to say exactly, but I can go on about it once you've...
1 minute. 1 minute.
So taboos are things that the culture is afraid to mention in case it happens. And so that's why you don't say he died, you have to say he passed away, or in some cultures, the names of dead ancestors are taboo, or things like that. So,
okay, hold on, Robin, 1 second. There's a microphone thing happening.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, that's okay. Better.
So in, I have to stop gesticulating. So in some cultures, the names of dead ancestors become taboo. So the things that are taboo in North American culture appear to be sex, race, and I think body size is
salary.
What?
Salary.
Salary.
A salary, yeah. So things, but words for those particular things. So you can't say fat. You have to say pleasantly plump. You can't say bitch. You have to say she's a witch that begins with a B. You can't say fuck. You have to say sexual intercourse. All the things that are supposedly not something you can do. So if you've got somebody who keeps saying fuck instead of folk, then you've got a vowel problem. Now, it's not a stress problem because it's only a one-syllable word, and that's where our famous, Anglo-Saxon monosyllables that are taboo words come in. So if you can come up with a taboo word that is, more than 2 syllables, I will be impressed with you.
So to put that into the challenge language here, we'll be able to find lots of words like beach and its silver counterpart, as I'm avoiding the taboo word there. Did you catch that?
It reminds me.
But there are some that have to do with multi-syllables where it still matters more the vowel than the stress. And the only one I've been able to think of so far is this very popular car in Europe, the Ford Focus. And no matter what you do to that, you can put the stress in the first syllable or the last syllable, but if the vowel is off, it's a problem no matter what. And so the problem is, if you change that focus to a mustard vowel, that's an example where the stress, you can say, they tend to say fuck us, Ford Focus, and then it's fuck us, and it's still a problem, right? So the Ford Focus is just as much a taboo phrase as the Ford Focus.
And in fact, it's not even if it's just mustard. If it's anything in the back vowels that is not a diphthong, it winds up focus. They'll crack. Right. Focus. That's a problem. They're all going to be a problem unless it somehow swoops up to the W.
So that's what's nice about these issues is that when they are these, a lot of times it's not just it's not a matter of having to hit the vowel that is expected. It's about doing what is not the vowel that's taboo. So the taboo vowel in focus would be anything that doesn't move, in other words. And so now if you just make sure it moves, you will move the brain into the category of this rose vowel, and it no longer has that taboo that taboo trigger. Okay, so focus as long as it moves. And so your solution as a teacher may not, it's not as specific as, yes, it is a rose word, but even easier than that, guess what it is yet again, right? It's going to be using a gesture to get them to move. So everyone try that. Focus, right? Focus. Great. The other times when it is vowel is going to be in these, especially these one syllable words. And we know the classic beach bitch problem that happens. This is something that when you talk about sort of taboo discussions among groups of people. Jennifer, you're in the room, aren't you? Do you want to share what your whole discussion has been with your 2T in the past week?
Just this morning, I was working with my Spanish-speaking 2T, and we were talking about moving and non-moving vowels. And so I wrote the word beach on the board, and I said, "Do you ever say this word?" And she says, "Oh no, that's a really hard word." And I said, "What's so hard of it?" And she says, "Well, you know."
And so that is part of, imagine when people immigrate or migrate across the world into new settings, and they meet up with compatriots or people of the same language group. And imagine what kinds of advice they get from people who have already been in that country a while, and the kinds of, be sure to go to this place for money transfers, and be sure to go to that place for work. And by the way, avoid these words, right? From our first language to the second language, because when we say it, it's bad news. Well, actually, it turns out that Spanish speakers in particular, at least in North America, it's a very common sort of, let me take you over here and tell you what not to say. And beach is one of the first things that's mentioned by a fellow speaker of Spanish to another speaker of Spanish. And they're told, you can say go to the shore, you can say go to the coast. And so they go through this list of what they can say instead of having to say the word beach. And it almost creates a kind of hysteria, or not hysteria, but like a superstition that no matter what I do, I'm going to end up saying the wrong sound, and I will now offend everybody. And so it's
they not talk about sheet at all?
Right.
Like sheet of paper, that's not one of the taboo words either, or is that?
It is. Okay. It's all of these that are, it's afraid of saying bitch and afraid of saying shit. And yet, let me ask you a question that will help us return to our big solution. How is it possible, if you know the vowels of Japanese, which raise your hand if you know the vowels of Japanese in this room, and then the vowels of Spanish, who knows the vowels of Spanish? I think between us, we all know those vowels, that vowel system, a, e, I, o, u, right? So if we say they have E in their language, how is it possible that they accidentally sound like they're using a silver vowel? Right? I mean, doesn't E sound like green?
Is it because their E doesn't move like our E? That's what my student and I were talking about that. And I got I got her to say E for me, and it's a non-moving E, if I can, is that possible?
Right. So yeah, Robin.
And I have an additional, in Spanish at least, I'm not sure about Japanese because Japanese doesn't have closed syllables in the same way. But in Spanish, the silver I is an allophone of E in a closed syllable. So if you have, if you're trying to say sheet, it'll come out shit no matter what, if you're saying it with the Spanish rules.
Mm-hmm.
So
and then the advice might be, well, smile some more, make it tense. And then the speaker of Spanish will say, sheet, sheet. And it still sounds, no matter how much they smile, it will still come across as shit. Isn't that unfair? So the English listener will still hear the taboo word instead of what we want to be able to say. Why? Because they're still just trying to make it wider, but in the end it comes back to movement. So the most subtle mover of all of our vowels is green, I would say, because it's not something you see with your mouth. I think we did this even last week, right? Touch the sides back here, and you can say see it, and that's the flex that needs to be in place, but without a release. So Jennifer's student needs to be able to engage these two muscles, see, and then she can say beach, beach. And notice I can even say beach, beach, with my closed mouth, not smiling at all. Beach. So ventriloquists really give us a perspective on how you don't have to have a big smiling mouth to make these sounds.
It reminds me when I started to teach my first days, I was afraid of these taboo words in my lessons.
Sure.
Because I was not an experienced teacher. But please take this sheet of paper.
Right. So let's just spend more time on the vowel and hope that that gets us through. Good. Good. Well, so, you know, do we have any other stories of where the vowel, no matter what you try to do with the stress, is the issue? The one other one I will come to, I like this one, is, and this has come up with my actual students, and then Robin's had it happen too. We both live and work in Maryland, and Maryland is the blue crab state? Is that what it's called? The crab state. So crabs are a big deal here. You go crabbing and you catch crabs. And I worked at University of Maryland at a time when I had a lot of Korean students. And so they'd go out and we'd assign them, go out and find these restaurants and go see what living in Maryland is like. And I had the pleasure of having that kind of course where my whole task was to stretch their zone of comfort and to help them actually, you know, engage in society. And so one of the assignments was to go out to, you know, Moe's Crab Shack and order crab soup and all this. And my student came back and said, it did not go well. You know, he said it did not go well. And I said, what happened? And he said, the waitress was offended and got mad at us. And I said, why? He said, well, I asked for the crab soup. And, you know, the crab soup. And so it apparently turned out they'd had this discussion about, you know, I want soup. Which soup do you want? The crab soup. And then people decided to be sensitive about this and hear the word crap. So what's going on with, and Robin?
I have a story. My story is, after my weekly teaching pronunciation class, I went to the Subway and to get a sandwich, and I'm in a long line behind many people, and in front of me, we finally get to the place where you order, and they had a special. It was seafood and crab sandwich, and so the person in front of me, an international student of some kind, says, seafood crab. And the woman behind the counter says, beef and what? And he goes, that one. Just, oh, seafood and crab. Okay.
Yeah.
But she thought he said beef and crap. So seafood crap is similar enough
To beef and crap.
beef and crap that she was triggered by the taboo.
Yeah. And if you've heard any of some of our stress stories, we know that the brain will go to these kind of absurd conclusions before it will come back and find the reasonable answer. So beef and crap, I mean, who orders that, right? And yet, you know, she went there deciding to be offended. So that problem is not really a which color problem, but it is a problem of something that's a bit of a sleeper problem. We don't recognize it as something till it kind of rears its ugly head. Robin's going to wait on the answer here, and anyone who already knows they know, like Jennifer, is going to wait. What's happening here? Why does he sound like he's saying crap? Crab, crap. And let me just say, it's not a consonant issue, which seems like the obvious answer, right? Crab, crap. Crab, crap. So if let's just say it's a student for whom B and P are going to be allophones and he can't fix it right now, what can he do? What's the real underlying problem here? Can you hear the difference? Crab, crap, 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 crab, crab, crab.
Just the length?
There you go. And I'm watching Matthew do this. Matthew's doing this, and Mark says the length, exactly. So it's the time on the vowel. Same vowel color, but the time on the vowel is going to influence the way the listener hears it. So why is that?
But isn't that because when the word ends with a B, it changes the length, like with a P and a B, it's not the same length,
Right.
depending
So,
on whether or not the consonant is sounded
right.
or not.
So, they look like they have the same segments in them, right? K, and then b and p would be the difference. But because this is voiced, we actually prepare for the voicedness by spending more time on that vowel sound, right? Up here, we spend less time because I'll let Robin elaborate on that, but essentially our brain knows we don't need a lot of energy and a lot of vocal engagement to perform that ending. It's a stop, crap.
And in fact, a lot of English speakers devoice at the ends of utterances, and their students perceive it as a voiceless sound. So you might be teaching your student crap, and you're still saying it as a P, but all English speakers will perceive what you just said as a B. So if I said crab cake, I'm saying a P there, but you're not perceiving it as a P. You're perceiving it as a B because I've lengthened that vowel enough. So your students can also fool the listener's ears by lengthening the vowel, and they don't have to try to remember to make it an actual crab cake,
Yeah.
a voice sound.
And because we have all of this power with our hand, we can actually deal with a really tricky consonant issue. Those for whom this is tricky, it remains tricky. It's not an easy thing to fix. In fact, that's what's so interesting is that now that we have a way to teach vowels, they're so much easier to deal with in a way than really tricky allophonic issues in consonants. So because your student is so hardwired to, to consider them one sound, for example, or to not aspirate their P or whatever is going on. But we can certainly spend more time on the vowel. So everyone just try this. You're going to say the word crap, but you're going to spend more time on the vowel. Ready? Say crab, crab, crab. Now just don't aspirate it. Don't say crap, right? So it's crab, crab, crab soup, crab soup. Okay, so these little workarounds are actually pretty effective to get away from the trigger of the taboo that they're worried about. And they can actually go try it out and they'll say, wow, it actually works. I can, whatever it happens to be, that particular word. And they'll always come up with new ones. Yeah, Robin.
And you're also not stuck in the listen harder, say it again cycle where you say, no, crab, and they'll say crab, crap soup. And because they think if they're a German speaker, for example, you'll swear up and down that you're saying a B, but German has final devoicing and they think they're saying a B and it comes out a P. And it's very hard to undo a rule that exists in the native language. It's harder than learning a new sound.
That's right. Neil, did you have a question or comment? By the way, you can just hold down your space bar and it's like a walkie-talkie. So space bar is magic.
I was going to ask for Now's help with this. Sometimes I find putting a situation in L1 in the learner's language so for them to hear a difference between a long and a short. For example, in Japanese, chopstick and bridge. Chopstick and bridge, hashi or hashi. And it's a different length of the A sound. So sometimes I do an impression of a stupid foreigner trying to speak Japanese, but get the wrong word, and then ask them to flip it back and say, now that's what you're doing in English when you do that. And sometimes that gets the light bulb moment of, oh, okay, I see.
Yeah.
So that sometimes if you can, I find if you can root it in the person's home language and they can see how stupid it sounds in Japanese or how strange it sounds in Japanese, maybe not stupid, then they can appreciate, okay, so I need to make that difference in my English pronunciation.
Yeah, anytime you can piggyback on your own knowledge of your students' first language, that can be super powerful. There's, a couple of examples in Spanish, not many, but where stress is the deal breaker because mostly it's not. But I often use papa and papa And that's the difference between father and potato. You know, so there's quite a difference between those words, first syllable stress and second syllable stress. But the rest of the language generally doesn't work like that. So that can be a powerful way for them to appreciate, oh my gosh, English is a language full of father and potato, where, you know, you can make a difference between words or just not be understood. So do look for those. That's great, Neil. That's great. Does anyone else have anything like that that they use to help? While you're thinking, I want to be sure we don't leave with the notion, because we asked the question, which is more important, color or stress? And we all agreed that it was stress. And then we just spent the whole session on color. But color is important because of the whole taboo issue. So I want you to know that there are times when it might be a color or it might be a consonant, you know, depending on the word. So, you know, the word election is going to be in a word where you do have to get into L and R in order to feel like the student can say that word comfortably and confidently. This comes, you know, you'll find your collection of words that must be addressed, and you can't shy away from it as a teacher. The question is, what strategies will you use to be sure that you don't feel shy about dealing with it? And then your student will feel relieved.
So how would you handle that one?
Oh, with election, the tongue has to touch the top of the mouth, right behind the teeth. So we can say la, 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 election, election, election. And maybe, or you could try, yeah, basically I would start with something that allows them to touch, and then start the rest of the word with lection, lection, and then add the first syllable, election. Something along those lines. Yeah. Notice that the R sound doesn't touch the roof of the mouth and mustn't. And the moment it does, it will trigger the taboo.
Yeah.
Or if you
or the reverse, sorry, the reverse.
Yeah, if you know what the rule is in that language for when it's an L and when it's an R, like in Korean, it's R between vowels and L at the end of the syllable, then try to make a fake end of syllable. Election, as opposed to erection, will fix it.
Yeah, that's right. So you can almost create a second beat, even if it's not a syllable. Election, election. A lot like taking off the first syllable of eschool. When people, Spanish speakers, add the S at the beginning, we just make it school, school, and resyllabify. Okay, good. Well, we wanted to finish out with just a couple. We won't finish out quite yet, but I'll show, yeah?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I guess it's a question for Dr. Barr or anybody. For those of us who teach multilingual classes where, you know, our students are from a lot of different countries, and we don't, you know, I do not know the rules for 10 different languages.
Sort of like we're...
Sorry, go ahead.
Pardon?
No, sorry, that was a mistake.
Oh, sorry. So, do you have places that you suggest that we can go to find that out? If we figure out that our student from Afghanistan, for example, is having a certain issue with certain sounds, where would you recommend we go to find out maybe what those rules are in the language that they speak?
Answer number one, your student's own pronunciation. So notice when your student is substituting the sound and when they're not, or when they're having trouble when they're not, because it's unlikely to be totally random, right? You may not be able to come up with a hard and fast rule, but you may notice that in a particular syllable context, that's, or, you know, before particular consonants, or, you know, in other situations, that's what, so your student knows what the rule is. I've also had some luck with a book called Learner English by Swan and Smith. The problem is that Swan and Smith does not take a phonological approach. They just list the different sounds that the language has, and they don't explain what the rules might be behind them, because they're not into theory. And not everything is interference, but anytime you say, well, sometimes they can pronounce this sound and sometimes they can't, that's probably some kind of rule either of their own language or of some kind of interlanguage that they've constructed that they're less aware of. And if you can find out when they're doing it, you can change the context till you can make them successful at it. Changing the syllable situation.
Well, since thank you. Yeah, Learner English I recently ordered and have, and it's sort of a book that needs another book that someone else should write based on the book. It needs to be translated in a way that's more practical for the rest of us. And so I encourage us all to keep these stories. I have a colleague who told me of having worked with a lot of Saudi students at one point in Colorado, just after 9/11. And the student that she was working with ended up talking about, you know, how this woman at the bank got really upset with him, and she probed and kept asking, like, what's going on. And it turned out that because of a vowel, an allophone between, I don't know quite what happened, because it seems to be quite so different, but there was a nasalization of olive. So it was supposed to be, I'll call you. And the nasalization ended up having it sound, I'll kill you. And there was and racism and, xenophobia and all these things going on that this student did and repeated the whole situation and still sounded like he was saying that. So again, we have to be ready to kind of collect this story and say, okay, his particular dialect of Arabic, has this vowel piece before the L, and I'm just going to keep note of that. And so we kind of collect a file folder of these stories. Okay. And I'm sure you're starting to mine through all your experience and thinking, oh, I have a few of those. Okay. I will share a video right now that I almost never share. Some of you have been in my course recently where I share Liz Bigler's video, which is kind of a cute and famous story of a Japanese friend of hers talking about, a friend at the hospital getting the IV treatment. And, she got all confused because she kept trying to, is it homeopathic? And finally they figure out it's the IV treatment, with the tube. And she had been confused because of stress. But this one is one I can't generally share. And Penny's recording this and I'm kind of thinking, but live at least I'll show it, and then maybe we'll cut it out for the public because I don't know, I feel funny. But this is a real story, and I'll go ahead and show my video because I think I did a decent job of telling it. And so here we go. Yeah. Here's my stress story from my early days of teaching at University of Maryland. I taught graduate students and international teaching assistants, including a woman from Saudi Arabia who was a civil engineer. So she was up in front of the class giving a micro teaching session, which was an opportunity for her to practice her pronunciation and demonstrate her improvement in front of these evaluators who were going to deem her ready to teach undergraduates. So she stood up and she said, hello, today I'm going to talk about semen and the effects of salt on the semen in the winter when the roads are frozen. And she went on and on about the semen this and the semen that, and the evaluators were all, looking down and just kind of mortified at what they were hearing. And strangely unable, I think, to really think as teachers of pronunciation. Instead, they were reacting as speakers of English to this word semen, 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 when in fact, what she was really trying to say was cement. So she was saying semen, green tea semen, rather than cement on the second syllable, cement. She was also doing something with that final T, not really using a stop, but just eliminating it altogether. So she was saying semen, and we needed to hear cement. So a couple of things were wrong in there, and the way I gave her feedback that day was I simply wrote it down. I wrote down the word semen. I underlined the first E in that word, and I showed that it was green. And then I wrote down the word cement, and I underlined the second E, and I wrote down that that's red. And then I gently told her to go look up those words so that she would know the difference for the future. And we never spoke explicitly about it again, but that's it. We never spoke explicitly about it again. It was a very painful moment to realize that even my professional colleagues could not keep their heads up, knowing that you should be able to say, I know what's happening here. It sounds like a taboo word. They weren't able to do that. They were cringing. They couldn't even look at her. And it went on for much longer than you wanted it to. So these things are very powerful. And it's just by way of saying, I encourage you, to, if it's uncomfortable, to start deciding, this is actually, who's going to talk about this if not you? So be ready to not necessarily raise it, but to be ready to answer the question that students might come to you with, and say, I can help you with that. Yeah. Other questions?
Well, I can see a whole color vowel sex ed program.
You're not joking. We actually had a sex education teacher join us at our booth at the big TESOL conference a few years ago, and before long, we had an entire color vowel sex ed lesson going on right there in the exhibit hall. It was pretty funny. So we've had all kinds of funny moments like that.
That was amazing. I was there for that.
Yeah. Yeah, all of a sudden we had everybody, white tie vagina. It was a huge crowd, and everybody was looking over. But I tell you, if anybody here does feel a little funny about these kinds of conversations, this woman was a sex ed teacher for middle school and high school for 25, 30 years, and she really was passionate. We have to feel comfortable with the words that people need and the words that they're fearful of. So just an added invitation to know that we actually serve almost like social workers for our students.
Yes, actually, as a linguist, I can give you all dispensation to say taboo words in your classroom.
That's right.
Even the word nigger, which is a problem if anything they say sounds like it. That's probably the most taboo word there is in the English language today. Aha, there it is, wicked words. So if your students, even if they're speaking Spanish and they say negra or something, negrito, something like, just mean black, because that's the word for black, that's going to get people who are speaking English thinking that they're saying taboo words.
Yeah, great. Wonderful. Well, hey, I want to thank everyone for joining us. Do we have any final questions or stories just about stress versus color and misunderstandings? You can hold on to those. If you think of them later, you can bring them to any Thursday night session, Friday morning session. But yes, Robin?
There's a article, I think back from the 1950s about cross-linguistic taboo and avoidance. And I'll track it down, and if I come up with it, I'll let you know what it is. But it's it's in I think it's in Del Hymes's Reader in Language, Culture, and Society, but I can't find the table of contents anywhere, so I'll have to hunt it up. But
okay.
There's an article about cross-linguistic taboo. So Thai students avoiding English words because they sound like Thai taboos and vice versa.
Yeah. Good. And so in the meantime, just remember too, we're even outside of the taboo world, that whole question of, eligible, illegible, elementary, all of that still stands. We know that stress is the deal breaker. Our hands are our friends. We want our students to be doing this too. And we'll just keep on keeping on that way. Okay. Have a wonderful week. Tell your friends and their family that now Blue Canoe is available for them. And we'll be seeing each other next week, I hope. Okay. Take care. Have a great one.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Take care.
Bye.